Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Zena Suisa. I'm president of Residence, Executive, and Team Coaching. We do coaching, consulting, and training for executives, leaders, teams, and we do many workshops. I am thrilled to share with you that I have a wonderful person that I'm interviewing today. It's Dr. Kim Cameron. And if with your permission, Kim, if I can call you Kim.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I'd like to share a little bit about Dr. Cameron. I would like my viewers to know who I'm interviewing. So Dr. Kim Cameron is the William Russell Kelly Professor of Management and Organizations in the Ross School of Business. He's one of the co-founders of the Center for Positive Organizations at the University of Michigan. His past research on organizational virtuousness, people so important, downsizing, effectiveness, corporate quality culture, and the development of leadership excellence has been published in more than 130 academic articles and 15 scholarly books. His current research focuses on virtuousness in organization, such as forgiveness, gratitude, kindness, and compassion, and the relationship to performance. He has been recognized as among the top 10 organizational scholars in the world whose work has been frequently downloaded on Google, and I'm one of those people who are downloads, definitely. Something on a side note, but so interesting, Dr. Cameron is married to Melinda Cummings, daughter of Hollywood actor, I remember, Robert Cummings. They are parents of 7 children. He has 23 grandchildren, and another one on the way very shortly, which is amazing. Thank you, Kim, for joining me today.
Oh, Zena, it's such a delight. Thank you. You're a positively energizing person, and it's great to be with you this morning.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So first of all, our focus today is going to be on positively energizing leaders. I chose that because I think it's so important, and it struck me, and I spoke to Kim earlier on, and it struck me how important this is for the workplace. So we're going to look at positive energy and how it really increases extraordinarily the energy of a leader, and thus the energy of the organization and the people. So first of all, I always have to have, because I'm a psychologist and a coach, we always have to define everything. So I'm going to define positive energy according to what you define, not me, but you did. Positive energy is a feeling of aliveness, arousal, vitality, and zest. It is the life-giving force that allows us to perform, to create, to persist. It unlocks capacity within us and actually increases our ability to flourish. How can we relate, Kim, positive energy to a positively energizing leader?
Thank you, Zena, and thanks for reading that definition. It's easy to write, but I seldom go back and read what I wrote. So thanks for that. So when I think about positive energy, there are actually at least 4 kinds of energy. One would be called physical energy, which when I use it, it diminishes. That is, if I run a marathon, I can't do it again. I need recovery time. So over time, physical energy will diminish. Another kind is emotional energy. Similarly, when I use it or expend it, it diminishes. I need to replenish it or resupply. I mean, I go to a ball game, I get in an intense argument or a debate. I need a break. A third kind of energy is mental energy, which, for example, in a classroom, if I take an exam or I write a major proposal or a paper or something, I got to have recovery time. So that diminishes as well. A fourth kind of energy is called relational energy. Relational energy is the kind of energy that occurs between 2 people, which, as you've just read, uplifts, elevates, causes me to flourish. That's the only kind of energy that, when used, elevates. That is, you never get exhausted by being around a person with whom you have a loving, supportive relationship. That's renewing. Now, young mothers will say, wait a minute, I'm exhausted with these little children. That's true, because the physical energy, the emotional energy all diminish. But there's a time when you hold that little baby or that little child, and that is very renewing. So relational energy is a kind of energy that we do research on, and it's the kind of energy that, as you've just mentioned, causes other people to flourish, unlocks capacity in other people, and so on. So relational energy in a relationship simply means I'm helping you flourish. And similarly, you're helping me flourish. And we never get tired of that. I have a good friend who's the number 2 person in the world's largest wheel manufacturer. And he used a wonderful analogy. He said, what I've discovered in my work is that the fundamental principle upon which manufacturing, especially Japanese manufacturing, is based is efficiency, eliminate waste, eliminating redundancy, and so on. That is Kaizen, and the highest quality possible is what they're attempting to achieve. Well, he says, negative energizing leaders create waste. And he uses the analogy: in the winter of Michigan, if a cold wind blows toward people, they put more clothes on. They protect themselves from the cold. Similarly, in organizations, if you have a de-energizing leader, they tend to protect themselves. So in the short run, you can get some results. I mean, you can get a whip-cracking, poke in the nose kind of a leader, and you'll get responses. You'll get compliance. Right. You'll never get flourishing and commitment, and especially dedication and loyalty over the long run, which unleashes potential that nobody can even manage. So relational energy is the freeing up of the potential in other human beings. Long answer, Zena.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. There is something that I think, as I read your books, and I have them over here. And I'll mention the names later. But as I read, I have many books, but I focused on the leadership books. As I went through the book, I noticed that you created a scale to measure positive energizing leadership in the workplace. There are five. You did 5 items.
That's right.
Items.
Yeah.
Items. I don't know what to call them, but items. Okay. And do you remember the items, like off the top of your head? Because I have them right here.
I do not remember them, but you sent them to me. So thank you for doing that.
I did. So I'll go through them. That's okay. The first one is, I feel invigorated when I interact with this person. And it's such a source of energy, the invigoration from someone else. After interacting with this person, I feel more energy to do my work. I feel increased vitality when I interact with this person. I would go to this person when I need to be pepped up. And after exchange with this person, I feel more stamina to do my work. How did you come up with this?
So, good question. These items emerged out of a whole set of interviews and focus groups, simply asking people to describe positively energizing leaders and other people in their lives. As you'd expect, there's a long list of those items that emerge, and then you simply, in a variety of ways, you can consolidate them down into the most predictive of all of the items. And those 5 ended up being the most predictive, and the themes that emerged from those interviews. What's interesting about those questions is we've done research. For example, in one study, we did research on 90 different organizations, asking people to rate the leader of their organization. In some cases, a business unit, and in some cases, an entire organization. Individuals with high scores across those 5 items ended up having significant impact on 2 things. One is employees and their experience, and the second is the organization's performance. So, for example, with regard to employees, engagement went up, innovation went up, performance went up. But what was interesting is family well-being went up. That is, it was outside of work impact. We sort of know that, but it was very clear in this research. And on the organization side, again, more team work, more collaboration, higher performance, and so on. That is, energizing leaders affect individuals as well as organizations. It was just really confirming evidence that energy matters.
Yeah, I like the fact that you did research on that. It just didn't come up with a bunch of questions, you know?
That's right.
That proves that. Now I'm going to ask you a question just off the cuff. Do you have to have all of those? Do you have to have all of those?
It's a good question because statistically, I mean, we have not done nearly as much research as needs to be done on this. Statistically, what we do is average scores across those 5 items. Individuals that score high compared to individuals that score low have a significant difference, that make a significant difference in individual and organization performance. So I have never split those 5 out and said, which one of these is most crucial, which one of these is most important. Somebody who listens to your podcast can maybe do that research. That is an item at a time or something like that. You know, frequently I'll do with executives, I'll do an exercise where I ask them simply to describe their own most positively energizing leaders, that is in their organization. And in addition to these 5 items, we end up with a whole bunch of other kinds of things. Maybe the most frequent is they help other people flourish, but without expecting a return. That is, they're simply generous in helping other people flourish. See, if I'm kind to you only to get a return, I'll only be kind if I get what I want. Well, by definition, it ceases to be kindness. Now it's manipulation. So flourishing on the part of somebody else is my goal. I don't need a return. Moms don't need a return to help their children flourish. You know, that's positive energy.
We know that. And it's interesting, and I'm going to just let you decide. I have a book called Positive Organization Scholarship, and that's going above and beyond. That's exactly what you're saying.
That book was written because many years ago, there were several of us. There were 3 of us at the University of Michigan. I was doing research. This is a long story, but I was doing a research on organizational forgiveness after downsizing. Because when organizations downsize, almost always they deteriorate in performance. Those that recover, and there are only 10% or so that flourish after downsizing, I began forming the impression that they had several attributes, one of which was they were able to put aside the harm, the difficulty, and look forward to a positive, optimistic future. Or in other words, to kind of forgive the difficulties or the harm that was caused. I have another good friend, Jane Dutton, who was doing research on compassion in organizations. There had been several events in her life that kind of triggered for her the fact that it's an organization phenomenon, not just an individual phenomenon. That is, organizations can be compassionate, not just individuals. And then my other good friend, Bob Quinn, was doing research on deep personal change. So we got together, and there was something that we knew was at the center or core of those topics, and we cared deeply about those topics. I referred to them as virtuousness. So we said, well, how are we going to learn from each other? Because the default in academics, as you know, is to go do your own thing, not to collaborate. So we created a center. We thought, well, that'll glue us together. And what we want to do is highlight the core academic foundation of what it is that's holding us together. It took us 6 months to come up with a title, but we ended up calling it Positive Organizational Scholarship. So that book was essentially, here's what we know about this general field. Wasn't nearly as much then as we know now.
Yeah. It's an amazing book, by the way. I read it. I really appreciate it.
You are wonderful.
Thank you. There's because I'm a believer in positive organization, there seems to be an echo. Do you hear it?
Yes.
I don't know if it's on. I think it's not kind of gone. I think it's okay. Now. Because I'm a believer in positive energizing leaders, you propose that it trumps by 4 times knowledge and informational power, if I can put that together. And I totally believe that, but could you help us understand how?
Yes. So let me explain a little bit about how those findings emerged. So when we draw pictures of organizations, we normally draw them like hierarchies, boxes and arrows. Well, a common alternative to drawing pictures like, pyramids or boxes and arrows is to draw a network map. So everybody knows what a network map is. It's in the back of an airline magazine. So some cities at the hub, some on the periphery, you connect them with airline routes. You could do that in organizations, but people, rather than cities, become the nodes. Well, then the question is, how do you connect people? Well, one way is on the basis of information flow. Who gives information to whom? Who gets information from whom? And the network research is very clear. If you are at the center or hub of an information network, your performance is higher than the norm, as is the unit you manage, which makes sense. I mean, all the information flows through you. You can decide what to share and so on. You have an advantage. All right, an alternative to information networks is influence networks. So who influences whom? Who is influenced by whom? Now, I don't know the percent for sure, but I'll bet 90% of the leadership literature equates influence and leadership. If you're influential, that means you're a leader. That's normally what's espoused. That's fine with me, but there's a third way to draw networks. One is on the basis of energy networks. Who energizes whom? Who is energized by whom? See, we could get an energy network in almost any organization by simply asking each person to rate every other person in the room. When I interact with Zena, what happens to my energy? On a Likert scale, 1, I'm very de-energized, 2, 3, 4, neither, 5, 6, 7, very positively energized. So I would then have a network map showing who are the positive energizers and who are less positively energizing, or maybe even de-energizing. Okay, so there's several implications of that research. One of them is your position in the energy network is 4 times more important in predicting performance than your position in the information network or the influence network. Now, think about that. We are constantly managing information. Did you come to the meeting? Did you get the memo? Do you understand where we're going? And so on. We're managing influence all the time. Here's the incentives, here's the goals, here's the targets, push, push. The question is, does anybody ever manage energy in an organization? Does anyone ever get rewarded or recognized or hired or promoted because they're a positive energizer? Because it's actually 4 times more important in predicting performance than influence or information. So it's fine with me that the leadership literature, for the most part, emphasizes influence. That's fine. But they miss energy. And it's a crucial, we sometimes talk about it as a latent resource. It exists, it just doesn't get managed in an organization. So positively energizing leaders unleash that potential. They simply energize others, and then that energy flourishes to the point you really can't even control the good things that will occur.
I so agree. And as a professor for many, many years, I saw and I started believing, and I told you from the beginning, I think I'm a positively energizing leader without bragging, but I saw the results. Whereas I see some, because I sat in on classes, the difference, amazing. They had influence, they had power, they had knowledge, but they didn't capture the people. They didn't capture the students.
Yes. There's an interesting set of data that just emerged. I'm doing some work now, excuse me, on universities literally throughout the world, where we take random faculty members, train them, and ask them to simply teach using positive energy, positive principles, exemplifying positive leadership. And then we measure 2 or 3 things. One is student well-being, student extent to which people are engaged and satisfied with the class. And more importantly, student performance, grading, scores on exams. And as it turns out, big impact. Students do better on both dimensions. They're academically performing better in the classroom, more engaged.
That's amazing. And it's going to lead me later on to a question, which I think this is what struck me most about your research. But first of all, if the parallel between an energizer an energizing leader and a de-energizing leader. Just a little bit about that.
Sure. So I actually have another little instrument that we've created, and I haven't done research on it, but it simply asks people, there are 10 items, and it asks people to rate themselves, and they can rate their leader or the organization. And it's one of those scales where it's anchored by opposites on each end of the scale. Let me just read some of those items. One of them is, I tend to see opportunities and am optimistic, versus I tend to be skeptical and see problems in proposals first. Or I instill confidence in others, versus I'm not very confident in others' abilities. Or I'm trusting and trustworthy, versus I don't come through on commitments very often. I'm not dependable. I tend to solve problems for others, versus I usually don't take the initiative to solve problems. I help other people flourish, versus I don't create opportunities for other people to be valued. Or I smile most of the time, versus I seldom smile most of the time. These are airport bookstore advice in some cases. I express gratitude and humility frequently, versus I'm inflexible. Once I've made up my mind, that's all there is. Or I'm genuine, authentic, and straightforward, versus I have a hard time stating exactly what I think or feel. Or I'm available to help others, to help and support other people, versus I tend to stay away from people who have problems. Or I inspire and pep up people, versus I'm not much of a cheerleader type person. So those are kind of simple things, and that's why it's just a self-analysis. But it gives a sense of a little bit of an aura. Now, all that said, we really need a lot more very careful and precise research. This entire field of endeavor is only maybe 10 years old at most. And like almost every field, we're sort of at the toddler stage. We kind of know how to walk. We think we know what we're doing, but there's a lot of imbalance, and we need to flourish. We need to get to be much more mature in this work.
Your work is amazing. And what struck me absolutely the most, and I have to read this, positive energy is not a personality attribute, inherent charisma, or physical attractiveness. It is not correlated with being extroverted, is a learned behavior. It is a choice. Everything you read there is a choice. I choose to smile. I choose to be compelling. I choose to be interesting. It's a choice. And what you said struck me as a psychologist and coach. Really, this is a learned behavior. It is a learned behavior. We can help people learn this. But the choice is on their part. They have to choose to be that way.
Exactly right. So sometimes people say, look, there's just a bunch of people who are charismatic and outgoing and extroverted.
Yeah.
And those are always the people that are positively energizing, but I'm not, people say. I'm much more demure, I'm more introverted and so on. Turns out you did a correlation between positive energy and the big 5 personality attributes.
Yep.
So a lot of psychologists say you can predict much of human behavior on the basis of 5 dimensions of personality, one of which is extroversion, introversion. So extroverts, are outgoing and so on, introverts much more demure. Okay, turns out the correlation between positive energy and extroversion, introversion is essentially 0.
Right.
Exactly 0, but that is, you can be one of these people and you just take up time, you don't energize anybody, versus other people much less demonstrative, not the first to jump in, but who give life to the system.
Right.
So it's not just who I am inherently, it's rather the behavior I manifest, the way I create a relationship with other people that tends to be energizing. So it doesn't matter if you're outgoing or not. It's the same way with a spouse. You can create this wonderfully enriching relationship, energizing each other. Your personality is hardly even relevant in that relationship.
I like what you did with the relationship to the big 5. Because
Yes.
it works, the openness, the agreeableness, the emotional stability, that works. So if you'd have to give a tip to a leader, and I'm sure you've worked with many leaders, to become a more positively energizing leader, just 1 or 2 things, what would you tell them?
So, it's I don't have the cookbook.
Yeah. know.
List. But here's an exercise that we've done sometimes, and I'll tell you the exercise and then some of the results. So frequently we'll ask a group of people, frequently executives or students, when we talk about energy, we simply say, okay, you've got 60 seconds, 1 minute, turn to the person next to you and create a positively energizing connection in 60 seconds. And the room erupts and everybody grabs somebody, and in 60 seconds, it's wonderful. And at the end we say, okay, what was positively energizing? And, you know, it's simple things like eye contact, smiles, sharing information with me, sometimes physical touch. You have to worry about that a little bit, but sometimes just grabbing somebody's hand, sharing information with me. See, there was a model many years ago that I learned about communication. And it has to do with when we form relationships, it goes from safe, not vulnerable, and not energizing, all the way through the continuum to vulnerable, open, and highly energizing. So there are 4 levels. One is, the first is to talk about topics, talk about the weather, talk about where you're from, talk about where your degree is, talk about your family. Second, that's pretty safe. Yes. Second is commonality, finding what we have in common. Oh, I know I've got a daughter who lives in Canada. Oh yeah, I know somebody who used to be at the University of Montreal, and so on. That is finding something we share. Third level is to talk about something personal that you'd never find out on your own. I'm sharing with you something very personal about me that is sort of opening up, much more vulnerable. I have to trust you more, but because of that, there is a more energizing connection. The last one is to talk about the relationship, talk about us. That's the most scary, the most intimate, but as it turns out, the most energizing. Now, nobody ever starts out walking up to somebody and saying, I want to talk about us. I mean, that's way too inappropriate. But over time in positive relationships, people end up getting deeper and deeper in terms of, here's the kind of relationship if I'm a boss, I call somebody into my office, I want to get below that. Here's the task, here's the responsibilities, how you doing? I want to get below that. That becomes more energizing. So it's not rocket science. No. And in fact, one of the really important points is anybody can do it. Yes. And I think everybody does do it at some point. Yeah. On the average, some of us are more curmudgeons than others, but we know how to do this.
Yeah. You know, as you're talking about the 4 levels, it seems that we have to have trust. Yes. and we take risks because we become, like you said, more vulnerable. But for me, Kim, the gift to life is self-awareness. Knowing oneself is key. And through that, we learn about ourselves and recreate ourselves that many times.
I love that. I think you're exactly right. You're a good example of this, Zena.
Thank you. Oh, thank you, Kim. So are you, by the way. The research you've done is phenomenal. I really, really appreciate it. I'd like to mention the names of the 2 books, but everybody has to listen because I'm not a teacher anymore, but it's okay. I still teach no matter what. Anybody, I'm ready to teach. Positive Leadership is the first one. Strategies for Extraordinary Performance. I started with that, and I'm glad I did. And then I went to, because these are the activities, you have amazing activities in here, practicing positive leadership. And it says tools and techniques that create extraordinary results. People go out there and buy these books. And it's not I'm selling your books. I just found them so amazing. They really are. They help so much because people don't come up with activities 1, 2, 3. It's not easy. It's not easy to come up, especially at that moment. You go through step by step and give some great activities.
You're very kind. Thank you, Zena.
And you're so welcome, Kim. It's so deserving.
You know what? Sorry, my phone just rang and I just turned it off, so we're okay.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Well, I thank you so much. I thank you so much. I spoke to you prior to this, and it was a terrific conversation, I believe. And I got to know you a little bit in such a short period of time. Phones have a way of ringing, you know that, you know. Thank goodness for phones, you know. I appreciate your work so much, and I appreciate you so much. I hope we can meet up one day. I really do, because I really
And I'll look forward to it. I want to make sure that happens, Zena.
want to also. I wish you well. A new baby's coming. There's nothing better than a new baby, you know. I have older grandchildren already, but there's nothing better. I wish you well, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really appreciate your spending this time with me.
You're very kind. I feel like I've made a good friend. I hope so.
So do I. So do I. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, Zena. Bye-bye.